My name is Sophia. I am 24 years old and I live in New York. If you saw me on the street today, you'd probably think I'm just another average young woman with a stable job, a cozy apartment, and a decent life. But if you looked closely, really, closely, you'd see something deeper behind my eyes. A story, a memory, a love that once meant everything to me, and eventually tore me apart. You see, my story doesn't start at some fancy college party or on a dating app. No. It starts long before that, when I was just a little girl, 6 years old, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Manhattan. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where summer days were spent riding bikes, sharing popsicles, and catching fireflies in mason jars. That's where I met him, Liam. He had just moved in next door with his mom and older sister. I still remember the first time I saw him. He was wearing a red superhero cape and running around his front yard with a stick in his hand, pretending to fight off invisible enemies. I, being the curious and slightly bossy kid I was, walked right up to him and asked, "What are you doing?" Without missing a beat, he said, "Saving the world. Want to help?" And just like that, we became best friends. From that day on, Liam and I were inseparable. We went to the same elementary school, sat next to each other on the bus, and even got matching backpacks in 3rd grade. People used to joke that we were like two puzzle pieces made for each other. And honestly, I believed it. He was kind, funny, and fiercely loyal, even as kids. When someone made fun of my glasses in the 4th grade, Liam stood up for me so fiercely he ended up in detention. And when I cried because I lost my favorite stuffed animal, he gave me his, even though he loved it just as much. That was Liam. Always putting others first, always putting me first. As we grew older, our friendship deepened into something else, something more powerful than I could have understood at the time. I think I started falling in love with him somewhere around the 7th grade. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was slow and soft, like the way the seasons change. One day you wake up and realize the air feels different. That's what it felt like with Liam. We had our first kiss when we were 15. It was in my backyard, under the stars, after a school dance. Neither of us had gone with dates. We just went together like we always did. I remember we were lying on the grass, talking about constellations and our dreams for the future. Then, he turned to me, smiled that crooked smile of his, and said, "You're my favorite person in the whole world, Sophia." And then he kissed me. It wasn't perfect. Our noses bumped and I was nervous. But to me, it felt like magic. From that point on, we were officially a couple. But in truth, we had been a couple long before that kiss. We were always us. We just finally had a word for it. High school was full of the usual drama, exams, gossip, late-night texts. But through it all, Liam and I were solid. We had our fights, sure, but we always found our way back to each other. When college came, things got more complicated. I got accepted to NYU, while Liam chose to attend a small college upstate. It was hard, not seeing each other every day, but we made it work. We'd visit on weekends, FaceTime every night, and send each other handwritten letters. Yes, letters. In a world of texts and Snapchats, Liam still believed in the old-fashioned kind of romance. I used to read those letters over and over again, especially when I missed him the most. Those 4 years were a test, but we passed. When we graduated, we both moved back to New York City. He got a job as a web developer, and I started working in marketing. We found a small apartment in Brooklyn and moved in together. I thought that was it. We'd made it. The childhood sweethearts who beat the odds. I felt lucky. So lucky. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. We cooked dinners together, binge-watched, shows, and talked about adopting a dog. We even started planning for the future. We'd often walk past jewelry stores and he'd joke, "One day, Soph, I'll find you the biggest rock in there." I'd laugh and nudge him, but secretly my heart would flutter. I believed him. I trusted him. With everything I had. People often asked us, "What's your secret? How did you stay together for so long?" And I'd smile and say, "We just grew up with each other. We understand each other." I meant every word. I thought I knew Liam better than anyone in the world. I thought he knew me just as deeply. We were each other's roots, each other's wings. But somewhere along the line, small things started to change. At first, it was little things I barely noticed. He stopped making our Sunday morning pancakes, something he never missed. He started coming home later from work and brushed it off as just extra hours. He used to tell me everything, what he had for lunch, weird dreams, childhood memories, but suddenly he was quiet, closed off. I told myself it was just stress. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was overwhelmed. After all, adulthood can be exhausting. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I trusted him. I loved him. And when you've loved someone for 18 years, you don't just question them over a few weird moods or missed dinners. You give them space. You try to understand. You hold on. But the more I held on, the more he seemed to slip away. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find him sitting on the balcony staring at nothing. I'd ask what was wrong and he'd just say, "Nothing, go back to sleep." His kisses felt distant. His hugs felt shorter. I was losing him and I didn't know why. I tried everything, planned surprise dates, wrote him love notes like we used to do, even booked a weekend getaway. And for a moment, it felt like we were okay again. But it was like putting a bandage on a wound that kept reopening. The hardest part? I never stopped loving him. Even in the quiet, painful moments, I still saw that boy in the superhero cape. I still remembered the boy who gave me his stuffed animal, who kissed me under the stars, who promised me forever. But as much as I held on to those memories, I couldn't shake the growing feeling in my gut. Something was wrong. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to dig deeper. Because what if the truth was worse than my fears? And then, the signs I once chose to ignore became impossible to avoid. Looking back, I realized the signs were always there. Not all at once, not loud or glaring, but quiet, subtle, creeping in like shadows that slowly dimmed the light in our home. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking, that it was just a phase, that every couple goes through rough patches. But when I replay it all now, every little moment becomes a flashing red flag I should have paid more attention to. It started with his eyes. Liam used to look at me with this kind of softness that made me feel like the only girl in the world. There was always something unspoken in his gaze, like a quiet promise, like home. But somewhere along the way, that look faded. He still looked at me, but not into me. It was like his eyes started to drift, like his mind was somewhere else even, when we were sitting inches apart. I noticed it one morning while we were having coffee. I was telling him a funny story about my coworker, laughing as I stirred cream into my cup. And when I looked up, he wasn't listening. He was staring. Out the window, lost. And when I called his name, he blinked like he'd forgotten where he was. I brushed it off. He was probably tired, maybe stressed. I told myself not to take it personally, but then came the phone. Liam and I used to share everything. We were one of those couples that didn't need passwords because we never had anything to hide. He'd leave his phone on the couch on the kitchen counter, even in the bathroom without a second thought. But suddenly, he became protective. The phone was always in his pocket or face down on the table. He started using a passcode, which wasn't strange on its own, but he didn't tell me what it was. Not that I wanted to snoop. I just felt that invisible wall starting to rise. At night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd feel the bed shift ever so slightly as he turned away from me, screen lighting up his face. Sometimes he'd type quickly, then pause, then delete. I could hear the faint taps of his thumbs moving across the screen. I never said anything, never confronted him. Instead, I'd lie there with my heart pounding, pretending to sleep, swallowing the fear that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't talking to me. It was the little lies that chipped away at me. He'd say he was stuck in traffic, but maps showed no delays. He claimed he worked late, but he came home without his laptop or bag. He started hanging out with coworkers I'd never met, people he never mentioned before. When I asked questions, he'd get defensive, too defensive. "Why are you acting like this, Sophia? Don't you trust me?" He'd snap, and I'd retreat. I'd apologize. Because maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was projecting my own insecurities. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth was, I was scared of what I might find if I dug too deep. And so I convinced myself to look. The other way, love can be blinding like that. But then came the woman. It was a random Saturday afternoon. I was picking up dry cleaning when I spotted them. Liam and a tall brunette walking into a cafe across the street. They weren't holding hands, but they were close. Too close. Her hand briefly touched his back as they stepped inside. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I doubted what I saw. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was his sister's friend. But something inside me tightened and I couldn't shake it. That night, I casually asked, "Did you do anything interesting today?" Liam shrugged. "Just errands. Stayed home most of the day, actually." Lie. A bold, unapologetic lie. I stared at him, wondering how many other lies he'd told me with that same calm face. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry. I just tucked it away into the growing folder of doubts I kept hidden in my mind. Why didn't I press him then? Because I loved him. Because I believed, no, needed to believe, that the boy I had loved for 18 years wouldn't do this to me. Then came the box. One rainy afternoon while Liam was at work, I decided to clean out the closet in our bedroom. It wasn't snooping. It truly wasn't. I was looking for an old photo album I wanted to use for a gift project. As I shifted a stack of winter coats and shoe boxes, something slipped off the top shelf and landed at my feet. A small wooden box, one I'd never seen before. It was locked. Not with a key, but a simple latch. I hesitated. My heart raced. I stared at it for a long time before I finally opened it. Inside were a few envelopes, some loose Polaroids, and a thin gold bracelet I didn't recognize. I picked up one of the Polaroids. Liam with the same brunette woman from the cafe, smiling together on what looked like a beach. She was wearing the bracelet. I dropped the photo like it burned me. The room started spinning. I sat down on the floor, my hands trembling, tears stinging my eyes. I opened one of the envelopes. Inside was a card. "To my favorite escape. Can't wait for our next weekend away. Love, R." My whole body went numb. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest, like everything I thought was real had shattered in one cruel moment. I sat there on the floor for what felt like hours, replaying every kiss, every promise, every late-night conversation. Was any of it real? Had I been living in a fantasy while he built a second life right under my nose? When Liam came home that night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to process it. I needed to understand the extent of what was happening. I needed to be sure. So I started watching him more closely. I began noticing patterns, how he always disappeared on the last weekend of every month, how he never let me do his laundry anymore, how he suddenly had new cologne I didn't recognize. I even tracked his location once, something I swore I'd never do, but it showed him in Queens, far from his supposed meeting in Midtown. My heart broke every single day. But I kept pretending. I'd smile at him when he came home. I'd kiss him goodnight. I'd laugh at his jokes. All the while, I was gathering pieces, trying to understand who this man really was. The man I thought I knew for 18 years. I started asking quiet questions about work, about his colleagues, about his day, and his answers rarely matched up. He'd forget what lie he told the day before. He'd contradict himself. He stopped looking me in the eyes when he talked, and I stopped being afraid of the truth. I knew I couldn't live like this forever, trapped in a house with someone who was becoming a stranger. I needed answers. I needed to hear it from him. But part of me was still holding on, still hoping there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some reason that didn't involve betrayal, and that's the most painful part. Because deep down, I knew. I knew what was coming. I knew the truth was going to hurt. I knew that when I asked him to be honest, I'd never be able to go back to the way things were. But I also knew I deserved to know. I had given him 18 years of my life. My childhood, my teenage dreams, my first kiss, my future plans. Everything had been built around him. I had wrapped my heart in his name, trusting him to never break it. And yet, there I was, bleeding in silence, waiting for a confession that might never come, until the day I finally asked. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him and said, "Liam, is there something you need to tell me?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking, "are you seeing someone else?" There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. Then he looked away, and everything I feared was confirmed in that single silence. He looked away, not just with his eyes, but with his entire soul. I watched the man I had loved for 18 years, my best friend, my partner, my person, retreat into a silence so thick I could feel it crushing my chest. The pause felt like a lifetime. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I stared at him, waiting, hoping somehow that he would shake his head and laugh, that he'd call me crazy and pull me into a hug and tell me I had nothing to worry about. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I had known it for weeks, maybe months. I was just waiting for him to say it. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen," he said. Just like that, my world cracked open. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. I needed to hear him say it. I needed the truth to pour out of his mouth, ugly and raw and real. I didn't plan it. It just happened, he said, still not meeting my eyes. "Her name is Rachel. We met through work. I swear I didn't mean to fall for her, Sophia." Rachel. So that was the R from the letter. The woman in the cafe, the one in the photographs, the woman who wore the bracelet I found. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "Almost 2 years. 2 years. My knees nearly gave out. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands shaking. 2 years. That was 730 days. 730 nights he came home and kissed me goodnight. 730 mornings he woke, up beside me like everything was normal, like I was the only one. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things, break something, demand to know why. But I didn't. I just sat there, completely still, as the realization crashed over me like waves in a storm. 18 years. We had been together for 18 years. And for 2 of those years, he had been living a lie. Not just a mistake, a lie. A deliberate daily betrayal. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, as if that made any of it better. Things changed. We changed. I felt like we were growing apart. "Growing apart?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "And you thought the solution was to cheat on me for 2 years? To lie to my face every single day?" His head dropped. "I didn't know how to end it. With us. You're everything I've ever known, Soph. Don't call me that." That's what I wanted to say. He didn't get to call me that anymore. "I was scared," he continued. "Scared of losing everything. Scared of hurting you. But Rachel, she came into my life at a time when I felt lost. She made me feel seen again. And I thought maybe I owed it to myself to see where it would go." I laughed. I actually laughed, but it was bitter. Hollow. "So, what was I? A safety net?" "No," he said quickly. "You were my whole world. For so long, you were everything. I still love you, Sophia. I swear I do." My throat tightened. "Then how could you do this to someone you love?" He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. Not one more minute. Not in that apartment. Not under the same roof. Not in the place where every wall held memories of a love I thought was real. He didn't try to stop me, and maybe that was the answer I needed. I moved in with a friend, Hannah, who offered me her guest room without asking any questions. She was one of the few people I told right away. And even she, who had never been particularly fond of Liam, was speechless when I told her the full story. The first few days were a blur. I cried in the shower, in bed, even while brushing my teeth. Every moment felt like I was learning how to breathe again. I had imagined my entire life with Liam. Wedding plans, a house, kids, anniversaries, old age. And suddenly, that future was gone. Erased. I felt betrayed, humiliated. But most of all, I felt empty. You don't just lose a partner in a situation like this. You lose a lifetime, a foundation, your sense of identity. Liam wasn't just a boyfriend. He was woven into everything. My childhood, my memories, my family, my routines. Taking him out of my life felt like ripping my heart from my chest. And yet, part of me still missed him. As disgusting as it sounds, I missed the version of him I thought I had. The safe, loyal, funny Liam, who always made me feel like the luckiest girl in the world. But that Liam didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never had. A week after I left, he reached out. He texted me, then called, then emailed, apologies, long-winded explanations. He told me he broke things off with Rachel, that he wanted to fix things, that he was willing to go to therapy, start over, do anything. But I didn't answer. Because something inside me had finally snapped into place. I had spent so long making excuses for him, justifying his behavior, covering the cracks with tape and hope. I had given him 18 years. 18 years of unwavering love, loyalty, forgiveness. And what did I get in return? Lies, deceit, betrayal. The truth had shattered me, But in the cracks, I began to see something else. Me. The version of myself that had been lost in the shadow of us. The girl who deserved better. The woman who didn't need to hold on to someone just because they'd been part of her story for a long time. Love is not just history. It's not just time served. Love is trust, respect, honesty. And when those things are gone, it doesn't matter how long you've been together. It's no longer love. It's just habit, fear, loneliness. I decided I wouldn't go back. Not this time. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also the most freeing. I started going to therapy. I picked up journaling. I took long walks around the city and found comfort in strangers, in stories, in little things like coffee shops and bookstores. I cried a lot, but I also began to smile again, genuinely. I started to rediscover who I was without him, and slowly, I began to heal. It's been almost a year now. Liam reached out a few times, but eventually he stopped. I heard through a mutual friend that he moved to another city, probably trying to start over. I don't hate him anymore. I don't wish him harm. I just don't wish for him at all. I've learned that closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology or an explanation. Sometimes closure is just the moment you decide you're done waiting for it. Do I still think about him? Of course. 18. Years is a long time to forget. But those memories no longer control me. They're just that, memories. Pieces of a story that made me who I am today, and who I am now is someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who knows her worth. So, if you're watching this and you're holding on to someone who keeps breaking your heart, please listen to me. You deserve more. You deserve a love that doesn't make you question your sanity, that doesn't ask you to shrink yourself or sacrifice your peace. You deserve the kind of love that shows up, stays, and tells the truth. I loved him for 18 years, but in the end, it took losing him to find myself. And that was the truth that saved me.